What's going on, my coronavirus honors kiddos? It's Coach Fran. We just got to continue on with where we left off. Hope all is well with yourself, your health, your families, friends, etc. So, if you remember way back when, it seems, what we left off with was we got into the whole mess of finding key features of quadratics, where we showed you guys vertex form and factored form, we showed you standard form, and we found all these vertexes, the way it opens, x, y intercepts, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But now, good thing that we know what the picture looks like, but what we're also going to now start doing is solving these general equations and showing you actually how easy it is to actually do this. And I don't just say that just because it's me. We're going to teach you guys two methods. This one method that we're talking about is kind of the more generic method that everyone likes. It's called the quadratic formula. So for quadratic formula, the formula for it looks pretty nasty, but it's actually not that bad because it's literally the exact same formula over and over again. We just have to identify a couple things. Okay. So what we have to identify in standard form, which this is standard form, is we are going to identify our A value, our B value, and our C value, okay, which are seen here. You see your B value is used again, AC, and then the A value, okay. Now, if you remember from our last unit when we talked about x-intercepts in particular, what we discussed, and had you guys remember, hopefully, is that our x-intercepts had a lot of different vocab words that we could have used and interchanged. Okay. If you remember, in particular, our x-intercepts were the same thing as what we called roots. It was the same thing as what we called solutions. And what we also called, that's bad handwriting. Writing on tablets a little bit different. Zeros. Okay. All three of these guys meant the same thing. They're all the same as x-intercepts. So when we find a solution to an equation, okay, in particular, a solution is just going to always be finding us the x value. Choose a different color. So solution, whenever I ask you to find this solution, I'm going to be finding x. So what you have to think about is what I'm really finding is the x-intercept of a graph. That's all I'm finding. Is instead of me graphing it and having to find it, I can use this formula and find where my graph touches the x-axis. And that's the only thing I really care about, is finding those x-intercepts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this formula and plug in my B value into every place it's needed, my A value and my C value, and then solve it that way. Okay. Now you might notice one new thing that we're going to be talking about in my next video, or you saw that video beforehand, this might help you, is talking about what that sign means, that plus and minus. So this plus and minus sign, okay, all it means is that we're going to be solving this formula 2 times. We're going to solve it once when I add the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and once when I subtract it. So we're going to get 2 different solutions. So we're going to solve our formula when I'm adding and subtracting. That's all that sign means, is I'm going to put a plus there at one time, and then I'm going to go back and put a minus there. That's all that means. Nothing too serious. So there's a lot of ways to do this. Really, you can simplify the formula if you want. Some people like to do that. Or you can just type things in, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay. So all of this nonsense under the square root, that b squared minus 4ac, just a little vocab for you, is what we call the discriminant. of our formula. Okay, so if I ever tell you to find this discriminant, I solely want you to solve this stuff only under the square root. Okay, I don't want you to include it. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get into it. So for this first example, keep in mind, answer a quick question to yourself. What does every quadratic have to equal in order to solve it? 0. That's what we've talked about. So I want to get everything on one side. So in order to solve that, you notice I already meet that criteria. Everything, all of my terms are on one side, and I have just a 0 on the other. So now what I just need to identify are my A, B, and C values. So my A value, okay, I'm just going to be colorful. Because I can. If I can, well, why don't I do it? Okay. My A value is 2. My B value is -3. And my C value is -7. So these are the 3 numbers that I'm going to use in my formula. 2, -3, and -7. So really what a lot of people do just out of habit is they just like to solve this section. And if you just do this section in particular, you can always get the right answer. Everything in this section is optional. I can't spell simplify. Is optional if you want to simplify. Have you tried the sandwich yet? You know, that crispy chicken on toasted brioche is like, I'm experiencing some things right now. Look at all special. But you won't really get it until you get it. So, if I ask you for a simplified solution, I might just have you write this. If I just ask you for just the general solution, you can just write this up here. It really doesn't matter which way you go. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So if you notice, what's in place of every letter here? Parentheses. Parentheses are going to be your best friend when typing these formulas out. So it's x equals, what one here is -b. So my b value was -3. Okay. Even though there is a negative in the formula, if b is negative, I still need to write another negative, which is why parentheses are going to be your friend. Okay. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is -7. And all of this is going to be divided by 2 times a, which is 2. So you can solve this 2 ways. Like I said, you could type this whole equation here. I'm going to highlight it so you know what I'm talking about. We could sit here and type this whole formula into a calculator, or Desmos, which is what I'm going to be using since a lot of us don't have calculators. It'll spit out the answer for us in decimal form, which is great. But if I ask you to give me the simplified solution, what we want to do is we're going to want to simplify the items outside the parentheses. So that -3, the discriminant, and then the denominator, if we want to. That's if I ask for the simplified answer. So when I ask you to simplify the discriminant, I just want you to solve that mess under the square root. So I'm going to take that -3 squared minus 4 times 2 times -7 and rewrite that as just one number. So let's go ahead and do that. We can type that into a calculator, which I'm going to pull up Desmos as a resource. Which Desmos is going to be our friends, especially since we're not together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. He'll split screen and be fancy. Okay. So I'm going to take -3 squared Okay, I'm learning how to do this on the fly. Let's just do keyboard. Let's stop being bougie. negative 3 squared
Talk to us about this. Before we get into your new situation with the Eagles, what led to the discord in
minus 4
with your former coach, Matt Patricia?
times 2 times negative 7. And what does that give us? 65. So instead of that mess under the square root, instead I can just write positive 65. Which goes here. So all of that mess is the same thing as the number 65. Now, what I can also simplify is the negative 3 outside. So since I had 2 negatives on the outside, I can just write that as a positive 3. And think about it, what could I write as my simplified denominator? If it was 2 times 2, it can also now be 4. So this could be a simplified answer. But if I want to ask for a decimal, that's where Desmos comes into play and I actually have to solve stuff. So really what I'm just going to do is I'm going to solve this equation 2 times. Once when I'm adding, so I'm just going to add here. Oops, wrong spot. Once when I add the square root of 65, and then once when I just subtract it. And I'm going to get 2 different answers. So I'm going to use my calculator for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put, okay, let's set a fraction first. Where's my divide? So divide. So we're going to do 3 plus, so doing the addition side of it first, the square root, let's see if the square root, oh, there it is, of 65, because this is all due for me. All divided by 4. And it gives me an answer. So we're going to round to the nearest 10th. Okay. Okay, some notes you might see, I might have you round to the hundredths. Really just do whatever the instructions tell you. Sometimes I'll ask you to round to the hundredths. Sometimes I'll ask you to round to the 10th. Sometimes I might ask you to round to the 1,000th. Okay, be flexible and be able to do that. So 10th is just 1 decimal. So keeping in mind that this equals 2.76, which rounds to, since the 6 is there, I round up. So this is the same thing as 2.8. So if I asked you for just the simplified answer, it would be this. If I asked you for the decimal answer, it would be this. Both are equivalent. Now we're just going to go back and solve that equation again, except for the only difference now is I'm going to be subtracting instead of adding, which is what all that plus minus means. You solve it 2 times, once when I add and once when I subtract. So I get negative 1.26, which when I round to the 10th is negative 1.3. Okay. Now, what's nice as well, if you wanted to from the get-go, and some of you might be asking, is I could have, rather than writing just a simplified answer, which some people like to do that, okay, just giving you guys options, is from the get-go, as long as you know your numbers, I could have typed in what I highlighted in orange into Desmos and gotten the same answer, okay, with parentheses and all. But it's a little bit more to deal with. Some people don't like messing with all those numbers. Some people like to simplify it to make their life easy, which I'm perfectly fine with. Okay, the square root of, I'm just showing you guys what that looked like. Negative 3 squared. So it takes me a little longer because I do have a laptop I'm working off of. So So just bear with me. All of that divided by 2 times 2. And if you notice, I had gotten the same answer there. So then I could have written that down from the get-go and then could have gone back, and the only thing I would have had to have changed was the minus sign. Now, some people don't like to type all that mess out. Some people like to simplify the discriminant, the numbers on the outside, to get this whole deal. I'll highlight what I talk about when I'm talking about when I say this. Some people like to just type this guy out or solve it and then put that instead. Whatever is fine. If you notice, I got the same answer regardless. Okay? But if you type the parentheses and type the whole mess out in orange, just make sure you put parentheses behind or around every value that you've substituted. Your B, your A, and your C's. Okay? And really just plugging and chugging at that point. It's just practice and getting used to just using the formula, because it will always work with every quadratic. So for the next example, if you notice, like I talked about, what does every quadratic have to equal to solve? 0. So I'm not equal to 0. I have a negative 4 here. So what I have to do is move that negative 4 to the other side. So to get rid of it, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So instead of this equation, what I have is negative x squared minus 2x plus 4. It's an ugly 4. It's going to bother me. Not much better, but whatever. Equals 0. Okay? So this is the equation that I'm going to be referencing now. This guy. So my a value is the number in front of x squared, which is an understood negative 1. My b value is negative 2. My c value here is positive 4. So plugging my values in, the formula is negative b, so that negative 2, plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. So if you want to go from here and just substitute that whole formula into decimals, go ahead and do that. I'm going to simplify the discriminant because I don't want to deal with all that typing. So simplifying my discriminant first, negative b squared minus 4 times a times c. Solving that out really quickly, okay, what I have here is parentheses negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c is 20. So I'm just going to rewrite that as 20. It's a lot nicer to mess with. And since I had a negative times a negative 2 out front of that, it becomes positive 2. And my denominator is just negative 2. So if I asked you for the simplified answer solely, okay, this is what you'd give me. What these two guys are going to give me over here is the decimal solutions. When I actually use a calculator and solve it. Okay, so don't freak out on the different representations of the answers. It's all about just what they ask. Okay. So let's just plug each solution into my calculator. Keep in mind, once I'm going to add and then once I'm going to subtract. So working this out, I'm going to start off with my division sign. And in particular, why I'm doing the simplified solution is it's less for me to type on a desktop or on my laptop, which makes my life a little easier to teach you guys. So 2 plus the square root of 20 all divided by -2. Boom. There's my first answer. So we're just going to round this to the 10th again. So in this case, okay, and like I said, it's not always going to be to the 10th. It's just what I want for these examples. So in this case, it's going to be -3.2. And to find my other solution, just going to throw a subtraction in there, and I get 1.2. Okay. Because if I give you guys a Desmos assignment, which you will have in tandem with these notes, it does ask you specifically for the decimal solution, but for some assignments going forward, it might ask you for the simplified solution, which then you'll need to write the simplified solution. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on. We've got 2 more, nothing too serious, and then we'll be done. So going to go a little quicker through these guys. Just go ahead and be done with it, and then we'll finish. So what we got here in the first one is it's already equal to 0. So A is 2, B is -1, C is -3. So I'm just going to substitute all of my values into the formula. Simplifying my discriminant, okay, is simplifying that nastiness that's under my square root. Keep in mind, I'm not including the square root when I'm solving this. I am not including the square root. It's still going to be the square root of something, but it's the square root of just one number rather than all of this mess. So solving that out real quick, okay? This is -1 squared minus 4 times A times C, which is 25. Okay. Now on the outside I have a +1 because it was a negative times a -1. And at the bottom I have 4. Now some of you might also be asking from here, like, whoa, Coach Fran, that square root is a perfect square. You'd be correct. So if you wanted to write this as a simplified solution, this would be the same thing as 1 plus or minus 5, because the square root of 25 is 5, over 4. And then we could solve that way. So in this case, that might be a better simplified solution because it's without a square root. But I'm going to keep the square root just because that's what the notes have. Okay, but you could solve either one of those. So square root of 25 over 4. Going to solve when we add, and then going to solve when we subtract. So putting it into my calculator. Okay, setting my division. A lot of you are probably a lot faster than I am because you may have calculators at home. Plus the square root of 25, all divided by 4, which is 1.5. Which conveniently, this is already rounded to the 10th. Nothing too serious there. Just going back and changing that to put a subtraction, and it's -1. So yes, sometimes your answers will not have decimals. Sometimes they'll come out as whole numbers or just good integers, which is fine, okay? I know some of you might be saying, well, that's kind of annoying, like I know a lot of you guys say. It's fine. We have to be flexible with all ranges of numbers, whether it be a simplified, uglier solution, a decimal, a basic integer, whatever, okay? So our last one, and then this video is done. And then you can move on to the homework or whatever you like. So obviously in this case, it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to have to add this 4. So when I add that 4 to the other side, if it's negative on the right, it's going to be positive 4 on the left. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that. It's 5x squared plus 9x plus 4 is equal to 0. So this is going to be the formula that I use here. So my A value is positive 5, B value is positive 9, C value is positive 4. So here's my formula. And like I said, and if you're someone who's just been typing this bad boy into the calculator each time, you're not wrong. It's no big deal. You just like typing in a lot of mess, which is cool. That's your prerogative. Simplifying our discriminant. Okay. 9 squared minus 4 times 5 times 4. Working that out real quick. I'm going to get 9 squared minus 4 times 5 times 4 is equal to 1. So, just quick asking you, is 1 a perfect square? Hopefully your answer is a blaring yes. So, keep in mind, on the outside I had a negative times a 9. So this is just going to be negative 9. And at the bottom, it's just going to be 10. So this answer you can really be solving is negative 9 plus or minus 1 all over 10. Either one of these are acceptable simplified solutions. Preferably, though, if you can't simplify that radical or that square root, please go ahead and do so, because this one would probably be the more preferred. Okay. So, solving with addition, I'm going to do negative 9 plus the square root of 1 over 10. Or you can solve negative 9 plus 1. It doesn't matter. And then also be solving negative 9 minus the square root of 1 over 10. So, I'm just going to type in this simplified solution here. Okay, just to show you that it really doesn't matter. So, negative 9 plus 1 all over 10, negative 0.8. Or if you know how to write that as a fraction, it's negative 4 over 5. Either way is perfectly acceptable. And then just going on and changing that to a minus, it gives me negative 1. Ooh, it's massively zoomed in. So, hopefully you guys find that quadratic formula is relatively simple. There's a lot of ways that you can type it. I've shown you guys whether you type in the original nasty formula with all the parentheses, you can type it into Desmos and spit out an answer. You can simplify your discriminants and certain values out and go that route, whatever you'd like to do. Okay, we talked about a simplified solution versus a decimal solution. Make sure you guys are reading the questions and what they're asking for whenever you're assigned your homework assignments. And keep in mind, if you guys have any questions, okay, I've sent this out in an email. Honors Kids, I will be having office hours via video conference. It's in Canvas, okay? I will be having that on Fridays from 1 to 2. Okay, so Fridays from 1 to 2 is when Honors is going to have my office hours. I'm working with Level from 12 to 1, so if y'all got an email for that, I'm going to make an amendment to that because I have to have separate office hours for you guys, which is fine. So we can discuss any of your homeworks. We can go through that, and that's available to you. I'm also available via email or Canvas Messenger at any time. But if you'd like to get kind of as close to face-to-face as we can get through Canvas, that's going to be the route. And I'm going to be posting a video on my Canvas page as to how you can go about adding into those conferences. Okay. So if you have any questions, guys, please feel free to ask. And I hope you guys have a great day.